when you are constantly thinking of different things that you're grateful for, you are rewiring your brain to look for good and look for positivity in your day. It's not just so important, it's necessary. It is so mandatory, it's insane. And so when you think of 3 different things that you're grateful for, throughout the day, you're always going to be seeing good in everything, because even like a couple of days ago, I had a really rough night. And by the end of the night, I was still able to see good in what happened.
Yeah.
And the only way that you're able to do that and not drown in the negativity that is our society today is if your mind is already rewired to a place where you're able to see good and positivity and opportunity and light in every single crevice of darkness.
Welcome, welcome, one and all. This is a very special week, friends. Well, every week is special, but I have been waiting for this conversation for quite some time. Before I introduce this week's guest, a word from our sponsor, Scout Books. I want to tell you a bit about my friends at Scout Books in Portland, Oregon, a company that really does give a damn. They make custom pocket notebooks for your brand, business, event, or anything else you might want a sweet notebook for. But what really makes Scout Books unique is that they make all their books with 100% recycled paper, and they run their shop off of renewable energy. Scout Books also sponsors projects that benefit organizations doing good like the ACLU and the National Forest Foundation. They recently launched a book called We the People Are Powerful, a field guide to getting active in local politics, which is a place where individual action can really make a difference. So, if you, the Let's Give a Damn listener, want to make a guide for taking action in your own community, or create a fundraiser giveaway, or just check out some well-made notebooks, Scout Books is offering 15% off anything in their store. Go check out the following links to get 15% off Scout Books. That's scoutbooks.com/giveadamn. Again, that's scoutbooks.com/giveadamn to get 15% off anything and everything in their store. Now, back to introducing the show. 30 minutes ago, I walked back in the door of our temporary home just in time to sing to my kids, pray with them, and tuck them into bed. When I walked through that door, I was returning from a 4-day whirlwind trip to New York City, Baltimore, and DC, where I recorded 8 podcast conversations with absolutely phenomenal people. You'll hear a bunch of those conversations over the next few weeks. Today's conversation, however, is with the one and only Noor Tagouri. I met up with Noor and her husband, Adam, at the VaynerMedia office in Chelsea, Manhattan, and we had an absolutely fantastic hour together. Well, I had an absolutely fantastic hour, and it seemed like they enjoyed it as well. If you don't know about Noor, you're in for a treat. She is a Libyan-American Muslim woman. Her day job is for Newsy in DC. She speaks at public events. She tells stories. She advocates in more ways than one for those in and for those coming out of sex trafficking. We talk about her life, her faith, her work, and the multiple ways she gives a damn. Also, she just got married, so huge congrats to Noor and Adam. If you want to see amazing wedding photos, go check them out on her Instagram, which is simply her first name. So it's at Noor, Noor. Also, her husband Adam was there that day, and then 2 days later, I met them back up at their apartment building in DC to record a podcast conversation with her husband Adam. So you'll hear that in a few weeks. We talked about his apparel brand and so much more. I'll have much more about Noor in the show notes and on letsgiveadamn.com, so check those out so you can find out more about her. Enough talking. Without further ado, I'm Nick, and this is my conversation with Noor Tagouri. Very glad you're here. Let's start at I always like to begin with trying to figure out what made you, what are the kinds of things that made you who you are today, right? So let's go back to as far back as you want, childhood, your earliest memories, family, experiences in your life, the kinds of things that you can point to and say, this is most likely the reason I am the way that I am today. Because I would love to hear as much or as little as you want to share.
Okay, so my first impulsive answer was going to be my parents made me, and then I realized that that literally they made me. But they actually, when you say it that way, they made me. My first go-to thought is my dad. Because, when you're a kid and, you're a brat
yeah.
and your picking arguments with your parents and stuff, but like you also see that they want what's best for you. And I just like now more than ever, I realize I'm very, very, very similar to my dad. And the reason for that is like when I was a kid and I was 8 years old, I was obsessed with stories, and I until now like never leave the house without a book. But I was also really obsessed with asking questions and telling stories, and that's what I was good at. And my parents noticed that in me at a very young age. And my dad would talk to me as if I was an adult, make me watch the news, and was very, very like headstrong about making sure that I cared about my school. Like to the point where if I got a B in school, I would get grounded. Yeah. Like if I got a B on a test, I would get in trouble. And I remember like throwing fits about like, well, why is oh my gosh, I have a vivid memory of elementary school. Why does Kevin Bowen's parents give him $25 for a C on his report card, but I get in trouble for a B on a test? And they were just very tough with me in that way. And I'm so grateful for it now.
Are your parents, sorry to interrupt, are your parents, did they grow up here or did they come over?
So my mom came to the U.S. when she was 10, 11. Okay. Her father worked for the UN and the World Bank. Representing Libya. Both my parents are from Libya. And my dad came here when he was 27 for medical school. So I was born in Huntington, West Virginia. And that's where my dad was living. But I lived there for 8 days. And then we moved to Selma, Alabama, and Birmingham, Alabama, and then Southern Maryland. And that's where I grew up.
How is it like growing up as, well, just your family makeup in places like Huntington, West Virginia, Selma, Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama?
So I don't remember anywhere except for Southern Maryland because I was 3 when we moved to Southern Maryland. But I know that my mom started wearing the headscarf when she was in Selma, Alabama. So it was after I was born. And I know that my dad had like even said like, are you sure you want to put it on in a place like this? Like nobody in the area had that on. And she was like, if I'm going to do it anywhere, I'm going to do it here. And so she was very confident in that from like, from when I was a baby. And then we moved to Southern Maryland. I grew up there. So that's all I ever knew. But even from when I was a kid, I knew that I was different. And as silly as this sounds, I can't say that I knew that I was different because I was Arab or because I was Muslim. Like I knew I was different in school because of my hair color and my eye color. Like I always start my talks off by an experience from first grade when I remember walking into class and sitting down next to the only other girl who had dark brown hair and asking her if she was Muslim too, because I had never seen another girl at school with brown hair. And and that was something that I was really insecure about all the time. I remember like my dad's coworkers or people just saying, oh, you have really pretty eyes. And I'd say, no, my eyes are ugly because they're brown, you know, because like our beauty standards and the people that we would see on television, they were always blonde hair and blue-eyed. And that's like what we would see as beautiful. And that's not only like our culture, that's even in Arab culture and in Middle Eastern culture. Like people love Western beauty, and that's like what was always better. I had cousins in Libya who were blonde hair and blue-eyed because some of our family has those traits, and some of their like one of the sisters has brown hair and green eyes, and I always thought she was the prettiest, but people called her the ugly duckling because she wasn't blonde and blue-eyed, and that was kind of like the mentality that I had in my head. My parents never instilled that in me at all, and so like I actually remember growing up and my mom having me stand in front of a mirror and like say, who's that beautiful girl? Like, who is that courageous girl? Who is that strong girl? And like be very reaffirming. But that's just like when you're at school and you stand out and you're different, like that's not anything that someone who's 8, 9 years old ever wants to be. So that was kind of where my insecurity started in my identity. So it didn't even stem from religion. It just stemmed from looking different.
Gotcha. This is kind of off the cuff, but it has to do with what we're talking about. But because you mentioned the headscarf, I was listening to a podcast yesterday with Sam Harris. Have you ever interacted with Sam Harris? Yeah, no. I saw your face just now. What was that? You know who he is?
Yes.
Yeah. So bad news. Yeah. I mean, so smart, but yes. So he was talking with Fareed Zakaria. This is just one that just came out, and they had a discussion. It came up the whole. How is that a statement of women being able to express themselves freely when they're clearly not free to do what they want? What do you? I know this is super random because he's not going to listen to this, but what would you say to Sam? What are your thoughts on
It's not even my thoughts. It's what's Islam's stance on it. Like I chose to wear the hijab when I was 16 years old. My mom chose to wear it when she was 22 years old. The root, first of all, like what people need to understand is in the religion itself, there is a very like powerful verse that strictly says there is no compulsion in religion. And so every single action that you take in Islam has to stem from your intention. So even if you carry out an action and your intention wasn't for that, it doesn't count. So if somebody's going to say, you need to wear the headscarf, and the person doesn't want to and wears it because somebody else told them to, it doesn't count. So it stems from that choice. And women and men, because men do have a hijab, most people don't realize that, making that choice. Another thing is that it is a very personal choice. And so when you put on the hijab, my reason for doing it isn't going to be the same reason as the next person. Sure. And so if a lot of people, like the most common, I guess, reason that people say that they wear the hijab or what it means is a symbol of modesty, and how people interpret modesty is totally different from one another, right? So I can't sit here and say that I put this on to like be more modest in my dress. If I didn't believe that God told me to wear this or that this was something preferred, I wouldn't be wearing it. But that is my belief. And on top of all of that, to me, growing up and being so obsessed with like the way that I looked and being insecure in my differences and how I appeared and knowing that like I had a voice and that I wanted to make a difference in storytelling and having people see each other's truths, wearing this was a way to not only humble myself, but remind myself that I'm here for something much bigger than just me. And it's making a statement like when we are in a conversation, what I say means more than what my body looks like. At the same time, I am 110% of the belief that no one has a right to tell women how to dress, or anyone for that matter. And so when I have friends who are campaigning free the nipple, but also defending my right to wear the hijab, I will always be on the side of if you're not hurting other people, then you should be able to dress the way you want, to express yourself the way that you want, to practice your religion the way that you want, because that's what I was always taught.
Sam Harris, I hope you hear that. I'm going to tweet at him.
You should.
I'm going to. Your face immediately. I hope one of those cameras catches it. It just when I saw your face.
That's
what I feel about
though.
A lot of Fareed was amazing. He was very well spoken and well thought out. And most
it's interesting though that they had a guy on for that conversation.
It wasn't strictly about that, but it came up because that's something that Sam always talks about.
Yeah, he does talk about that, and it's interesting because he's also a guy. So
yeah.
But yeah, my face never hides anything.
Yeah, that's good. What do you call what you do? Who you are? Are you reporter, journalist, speaker, activist?
I'm a storyteller.
Storyteller.
Yeah, I tell stories, whether it's my story or giving other people a platform to share their stories and try to gain their trust so that we can exchange stories. That's just really what it is. And I do it in different platforms. So whether it's a documentary. Some of those, So I work as a reporter for Newsy, but I work on documentary series, and then in between I find stories that we work on. And so the thing that's unique about it is I work for the Policy Bureau, but I'm not a political reporter. That's not really my thing. So I find more subculture stories to cover. So when I started, I was working on a series called Americanize Me. So I traveled the country and profiled people people who are immigrants or immigrant families and how they brought their culture and their foods and how their foods have immigrated to the U.S. So covered policy in that way. And that's actually how I ended up going to Tennessee. I covered a Syrian refugee who opened up a falafel shop in Knoxville. And then in between covered stories, whether it was undercover graffiti artists or New York Fashion Week or even the reality of being a witch in Salem, things that people really wouldn't expect. And then I went on for months working on a series that I did called A Woman's Job. So women who work in male-dominated fields. So we covered a blacksmith, a farmer woodworker, a chemist, chemical engineer, executive chefs, and the only ever woman NFL coach, and an auto mechanic. And now for the past few months and for the next few months, I've been working on and will be working on a series on sex trafficking in the U.S., which was a cause that I care about and I've cared about since I was about 14 years old. And so working on a documentary series that covers aspects of that nobody has really talked about. And
what do you mean by, can you care to explain
what
that means?
First of all, when you talk to your average American about sex trafficking, their head is going to go to most likely a movie like Taken.
Yeah.
Or they're going to think of something that happens in Nepal and Thailand and Cambodia.
Instead of 2 miles down the street.
Instead of not even 2 miles down the street.
Right.
Instead of your next door neighbor.
Sure.
And the problem with that is that we constantly care about this issue overseas, but we forget to acknowledge the fact that it happens here. And there are so many different names to it. And so, and there's so many different looks to it that people like to ignore. So when you see a girl who the other day, actually, I saw in DC, like at 6 a.m, 2 girls totally naked on the street. And most people who are going to walk by that and have their own judgmental thoughts. But I remember calling up one of the survivors in our area and saying, hey, I saw these 2 girls who were on the street. And she was like, yeah, that street is pimp controlled by these pimps in Florida. And so they're working for him. And not only what trafficking entails in the U.S., because probably the biggest thing that I've learned while reporting on this is the way that journalists or the media covers it. So recently, CBS did like a almost 10-minute piece on trafficking and opened it up by, some call it the oldest profession in history. And they went into prostitution. Wow. And I was just like, oh my God, like this is doing such a disservice to what these women are actually going through. They had pictures of 3 white women and said these are the face of prostitution. And I was just like, well, no, an overwhelming majority of the women who are being trafficked and sold for sex are actually black women. And an overwhelming majority of the buyers are white men. And so so delving into how trafficking is far beyond just an issue about people wanting to buy sex. It's an issue of race, income inequality, gender inequality, and so on. But we're breaking down the series by covering aspects of it, including the heroin epidemic and trafficking, including the entire buyers aspect of it. So who the buyers are. So actually that's why we spent a week in Seattle covering what most people refer to as Johns, what people in the life refer to as tricks, and the demand side, and the Nordic model, which is focusing on capturing or arresting the pimps, traffickers, and Johns, and not the women and children, or even the boys who are being prostituted. We're also covering the debate around legalizing sex work. I know there's 6 episodes. Online trafficking, the front lines of like the law enforcement and the medical profession, and how they're responsible for being able to notice trafficking when it comes along, because people in nail salons and flight attendants and hotel concierge are being trained for this, but why aren't law enforcement and medical professionals being trained as much? And those are some of the ones off the top of my head. The foster care pipeline with this, because majority of the people who are trafficked in the U.S. have gone through some type of government care. So it's been a very, 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 very intense 4 months.
Yeah, what does that do to you emotionally? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know how to answer that, because the people around me are probably, I don't know. I can never go a day without talking about it. That's one thing. Like I've never, since we've started working on this, and I've cared about this issue. I've done papers, I've done stories. We even worked on, if we're going into the clothing line collaboration with Listen Up, like that was a cause that I did, was combating sex trafficking, because I'm so obsessed with this issue. And it just becomes overwhelming, and it takes a toll on you, because now I think like the simplest way to put it is like, I now realize why my parents never let me spend the night when I was a kid at my friends' houses, I walk into like the workplace or just walk on the street, and all I'm thinking about is like, oh my God, which one of you is buying sex?
Yeah.
Because when I was in Seattle and I walked into the buyer's class, I was shaking like in my boots, like my stomach was in knots, and I almost started crying because I realized that all of the men that I was looking at who were here because they had bought sex looked like the people that I worked with, that I went to school with. Like there's never a look for it. You would never be able to tell. And so I was just terrified, and I was like, oh my God, like how are we living in this society? And like there's such a strong sense of toxic masculinity that overwhelms our communities, and people are either too scared to address it, or we're so comfortable with it, or we're so used to it that it's not something that we call people out on. And every single thing that I see, that I watch, that I hear, I feel like is rooted in this issue almost, because it is a culture that we have created that allows for this to flourish.
How does it get? This is a dumb question.
How does it get fixed?
Because it's not an easy answer. But like, well, I guess what's the end goal? Like, what do you want to see happen? What do you want to see like ignited in people so that we can get closer to the fix? Right.
That is such a complicated question, because it's not something that will. So long as there's a demand to buy sex, there's always going to be.
Which won't. I mean.
But here's the thing. When it was only a few decades ago, maybe even a couple, where smoking cigarettes was super cool. Like people were always smoking. It was like the cool thing to do. And then campaigns like wide and far pretty much shunned people who were smoking cigarettes. And it was seen as something disgusting. And like it's one of those things that it would never be as easy. But until we make buying sex something that is looked down upon in our culture, there's always going to be a demand for it.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be acceptability. Like you have to think about it in the most basic ways. Where does some of this start? So like if your friend is having a bachelor party and you want to buy him a stripper and then you want to buy him a prostitute, which by the way, a lot of the times those women like who are being trafficked or who are survivors have said, like even when they're in the room with the guy says something like, I don't want to do this, but don't tell my friends I didn't. So what does that mean? That means that he doesn't want to participate, but he'll look a certain way that if he doesn't. So he still wants his friends to think that he went forward with it because it's cool. It makes him seem masculine. It makes him seem more of a, quote, man. And this is stemmed in this toxic masculinity where you are constantly looking at women or looking at sex a certain way and allowing for harassment or assault to be kind of brushed off as something that's okay. And so until guys are more comfortable with, and even women are more comfortable with calling out this kind of culture. So like if you're in the locker room or you're with your friends and you hear a guy talking about a girl a certain way, or talking about sex a certain way, and you're silent, it's just as bad.
Complicit. It's
just as bad as egging it on. Until you're like, that's not cool. Like, why do you think that's okay? And break down that if this was your sister, if this was your mom, or if this was, it doesn't even have to be. If this is a person, and that you should care enough to realize that this isn't okay. And I mean, it's an entire culture, and what they're doing in Seattle is very progressive. It's also like the only place in the U.S. that's taken this approach, where they're addressing this from a demand perspective, but also from dismantling the patriarchy and addressing toxic masculinity.
Very complicated.
Yeah,
complex.
it really is.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, at the end of the day, if you hear someone catcalling, or if you hear your guys talking crap or trying to like build their heads up by talking about women a certain way, tell them it's not cool. Like, you don't think that's cool.
Yeah. This show and this whole idea and project exists to help people do that. My whole aim is to take away the excuses people use to not give a damn, right? That's the whole thing, is like, speak up, start, begin right now, not another moment, because we can come up with all the excuses. That guy in the locker room or that guy with this, like, he can come up with a million excuses.
It's just boy talk.
Right. Yeah, we have all the way from the top, right? We have that where it was like, oh, it's okay because it was locker room talk, instead of like, no, that's not right anytime, anywhere, ever.
Yeah. And until you realize that that is the root of oppression of women in our society today, when it comes to an issue like trafficking, like, it's never going to go away. It's never going to be easier. And I don't know, it's hard, especially with everything that's going on today, to be vigilant in making sure that people are really more aware of the damage that something like this does.
Yeah. What role does your faith play in everything that you're doing? Everything you aim to do in your life?
My faith is absolutely everything to me, because one thing that's different about Islam as a religion is that it isn't just going to church or going to the mosque to pray. It is an entire lifestyle. Yeah. So you pray 5 times a day, you fast, you give charity, but it all comes down to your character and the way that you choose to live, from how you wash yourself in the bathroom to how you greet people with peace. Every single detail is something that you're supposed to have an intention for and is supposed to build your character up. And so for me, what I'm doing as a storyteller, what I'm doing as a feminist, is so strongly rooted in my religion and the examples that I've been given, because it was always taught to me that whenever you have the opportunity to help those who are oppressed, or whenever you have the opportunity to speak up, or whenever you have the opportunity to give and give and give, then you take it. And that is all rooted in my religion. And so every single choice that I make, I'm seeking guidance for, and every single opportunity that I take, I've sought guidance for, and I'm taking on, because I feel like it'll help me in fulfilling my life's purpose, and that is rooted in my faith.
The Let's Give a Damn podcast is also sponsored by my friends at Ruby Cup. They're a buy one, give one menstruation cup company that is helping women in the modern world and the developing world have a healthy and safe period. I love the incredible work they are doing. They're a startup based in Spain, and over the next 4 weeks, Julie, one of the co-founders, is going to share their story with us. First, Julie is going to tell us a little bit about how Ruby Cup started. Thanks, Julie. Take it away.
So Ruby Cup actually started at business school in Copenhagen. Me and my 2 co-founders, we were studying sustainable business strategies and social entrepreneurship, and we really wanted to create a company that works on sustainability, but also does good in the world at the same time. So the business philosophy came actually before Ruby Cup. Ruby Cup was introduced later, because we were introduced to the cup as a product and tried it, and was really, really amazed with how amazing it is, or it kind of changes your perception of periods. So we started researching a lot about menstruation, and something that I've always taken for granted, suddenly it became clear to me that there are so many people in the world that do not have access to safe products and safe and reliable information about periods.
Thanks a lot, Julie. And everyone else, remember that parts 2, 3, and 4 of their story are coming in the weeks ahead. In the meantime, check out their story and their work and the products they sell at rubycup.com. Now, back to the show. One of my favorite Martin Luther King Jr. quotes is, and it's really the impetus for this project, is our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And I truly believe that. I've lived my whole life on that premise that, like, it goes back to what you just said, right? Like, when we are silent about things that matter, we begin to disintegrate in more ways than one, because that's what it's about, standing up and believing in something and acting on those beliefs, right? And so the Let's Give a Damn family, I refer to them as unsilent people, because I want them to speak up and speak out, not with just verbally, but with their lives. What would you, and most of them are, we actually have listeners all across the spectrum, older people that have already quit their jobs to, like, go do that thing that they've been avoiding for years because it didn't pay as much, and we've got people all over the place, right? But they're mostly millennials. what would you say to them? So they really want to give a damn. They really want to get going. They want to answer the call that they feel in their heart. Give them, us, a few pieces of advice. How can they begin right now to give a damn?
So you mentioned that there are older listeners who are like retired and now pursuing what their heart tells them to do. I believe that our life's purpose, or this personal legend that people have set for them, is something that we are familiar with for a very long time. It's something that we've known since we were very young. Like, I knew that I was good at telling stories, or that's what made me happy. But it's the societal standard, the fear of not making enough money, what people think, what your family thinks, what your friends think, and just an overwhelming amount of fear that kind of keeps people from doing it, and gives you this blurred vision towards whatever it is that you know you're meant to do, and then you kind of fall into this place of comfort. And I always say, I believe that everything you want is outside of your comfort zone. So if you're comfortable and if you're stagnant, then you are in the worst place you can be. But also, for me, it was always taking that skill. So if I was good at storytelling, or if I was good at finding platforms to tell stories, taking that skill and combining it with causes that pain you. So for me, the cause was combating sex trafficking, but in general, just raising awareness about sexual assault and sexual harassment and feminism in that way, especially because of the background that I come from. Because there is this huge misunderstanding that because I'm dressed a certain way, because I cover my head, that I'm oppressed, or that Muslim women are oppressed. And in fact, it is the complete opposite. It means that I've reclaimed my power as a woman, that I focus on what my voice has to say, and that when I am sharing a story or when I'm telling you something, you are going to pay attention, and this is part of who I am. And I'm unapologetic about it. And so using that skill and combining it with those causes that pain me the most, another cause is the misrepresentation of marginalized communities and groups of people. And because of that, I've been able to gain the trust of so many people who have so graciously given me their stories to share and their truths to share. And every single time a relationship is created and a friend is found, and that even if I don't agree with all of their views, or they don't agree with all of mine, or even if there are our paths weren't similar at all, that we've collected each other, and that we have made a stronger connection and therefore created a stronger story, because there is this just understanding between both of us that I know what it's like and you know what it's like, and so we're going to be totally raw and vulnerable in doing this. And so when you're able to find whatever the skill is that you know that you're good at, or that you enjoy so much, and then causes that pain you that you really want to take on, and it can be one, it can be many. I know it's overwhelming sometimes to think about the problems of the world and then just think I don't even know where to start. Just take that first step and do what feels right in your heart, and then things will just come to you. It'll just always happen. And we have so many social justice activists and people online who are just, it's very saturated right now, where people are very loud and people are very angry and people are caring so much and doing a lot, but don't compare yourself and don't pay attention to that, and just find the things that you know you can be a part of and make a difference in, and just do it slowly by slowly, day by day. My mom is a huge example of that. So she was a guidance counselor, and then when I was around 12 years old, we were at a convention, and she came across a table of a women's shelter, and she was just like, I want help. My mom's biggest thing is that she can't stand seeing people who are hungry. And at the time, we connected with the founder of the shelter, and this was 11 years ago. And they were like, we don't need food right now. We just need toiletries. Our women need shampoo and conditioners, and pads and tampons and body wash and creams, whatever you can find that that's what our women need right now. And so I remember we started a drive at my school, and we started collecting stuff. And this was the key thing that my mom did, was she listened. She didn't go out and she didn't say, I'm going to bring you this, I'm going to bring you that. She said, what do you guys need from me? And I will give. And so it was toiletries at one point, and then it became food, and then it became toiletries again, and then it became a new refrigerator, or whatever it was. And we would always just listen. And until now, we do monthly grocery runs, where we take a list of the stuff that they need at the shelter right now, what groceries, what foods the women and children want to eat, not what we think they should be eating. And we go out and we get them. And that was one thing that she always did, and it was something that always pained her, and now like has been a part of like a family tradition, like of what we work on. And so just being able to see her and my dad as an example of taking on like the smaller causes that are close to home, because like one person can't solve world hunger, but if you know your neighbor is hungry, then you help.
Yeah. The difference is this savior complex versus being a humble
listener,
absolutely. Right? The savior thing is very temporary. It might look flashy for a minute, but it's going to go away because you're not really listening to what the actual needs are.
And the intention isn't even there.
Right.
Like it's if you're going into doing whatever it is for whatever cause because it's going to make you look a certain way, or if it's going to make you feel, just because it's going to make you feel so, like, and when you help, you're always going to feel good, but it's a very hard battle, because you're also going to feel very bad, because you're going to realize that you can't do everything, and there's so much that needs to be done. But if you know you're doing as much as you can, and then you're doing what people need of you, then it's always going to be okay. But the second, like, and the thing is, people can sense bullshit. They can see if you're ingenuine in the help. And I've seen it so many times. I've encountered it so many times where people have this savior complex, have this like sense of arrogance where they think that they're doing so much for the community, when in turn, like, it's so loud and it's so apparent that your intention isn't even there, and people can feel that.
Yeah.
And not saying like you can't post about the stuff that you're doing, but like even for my mom and I, we'll post about the grocery runs, because the way that we do it, and this is how we've always thought about it, is we post and we say, hey, we're doing it this month. If you want to contribute, you can donate here. But it's not that we're trying to show off. It's that we're trying to give, and I always call it a good deed opportunity, because we want to give other people the opportunity to do something good. And people will always write and be like, thank you so much for allowing us this opportunity, you know? Like, we don't want to keep it all for ourselves. And not only that, but it inspires other people to go out and do the same thing. Like, how many people are doing that in their own communities now?
Yep.
And it all stems from like wanting to give others the opportunity, and realizing that you are nothing without like your own blessings and sense of thanks, but also that whatever your situation is can be gone in a second. And at the end of the day, when you're the one who's in need, or when you're the one who like is in need of help or food or whatever it is, are you going to be able to say that when you were able to give, that you gave too? And a lot of people see it as a sense of like, oh, well, when I donate or when I give, I'm losing money, or I'm losing food, or I'm losing whatever it is. But I don't know, the way that my family has always seen her, my mom has always, like, my mom has cried to me saying this before, but that it's such a blessing to be in that position, because when you're able to give, like, you are always gaining 10 times more.
Yeah.
Whether it's actually
always true.
And that's the thing. It's like it's so crazy to me how people don't realize that. Yeah. It's so apparent. Like, just trust me. Just give one time. Just but with good intention in your heart.
Right.
And even in Islam, we have a saying like, if you give with your right, like give with your right in a way where like your left doesn't even see it, and like do it humbly and realize that what you're doing, like you giving to that person, you're not losing anything.
Yeah. Well, I think you just said something very important, because many people have given and they don't feel fulfilled and good about it after, because they didn't do it with the right motive. So then they just quit. Instead of saying, what the hell did you just do that way for? They just end up not giving anymore, because that didn't feel right. That didn't feel good. There was no ROI or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of people that did give that one time, but did it poorly. And now they're suffering. They don't see themselves as suffering, but they're suffering now by spending all their time on themselves, 4 hours of Netflix every night, just a very self-centered sort of life, because they did try it, but it didn't work out. It didn't feel good. It didn't, you know?
And at that point, ask yourself if you're happy.
Yeah.
Like, I've never, ever, ever felt happiness at times where I wasn't giving. And it doesn't mean you have to give money. It means like giving your time and giving like your kindness and giving a word of advice. And in Islam, like for us, the word for charity is sadaqah. And one of the ways to give sadaqah is with a smile. Like, you literally get good deeds for smiling at somebody, because you don't ever know what they're going through.
Absolutely.
And it's as simple as that. Like, we walk around with our heads so high in such like arrogance, where we feel like the world revolves around us, and in reality, there are so many people who are going through so much more than you could ever imagine. And for you to ever think that, like, well, like, what's it to me? Like, why should I care? It's one of those things that, like, even when, and it's so sad. I know so many people whose, like, parents taught them, well, you don't give to people on the street because they're just going to go buy alcohol, or they're going to go, like, buy drugs. And one of my friends in New York actually told me this, because I was like, I know that that's a possibility, but you never know. And so I will still always give. And then she was like, well, even if you don't know, even if they are going to go buy drugs, who are you to say that they can't?
Yeah.
And the reason that this is so strong in my head now is because I recently interviewed for this series a friend of mine that I've known since elementary school who's a heroin addict. And she broke down to me what the addiction is. And an addiction, especially with heroin, is a disease. Like, it's an overwhelming thing that when typical people who are not addicts need air to survive, need food to survive, need water to survive, an addict needs drugs to survive, like, actually, or they will die. And who are you to say, I'm not gonna give them anything because I'm better than them, and they're like a bad person, which being an addict doesn't make you a bad person. And just walk away from that, unless you're gonna hold their hand and walk them to detox and walk them to rehab. Like, who are you to say that? And so that's why, like, if you ever have anything, if I ever, like, whenever I see anyone, if I have the ability to give at that moment, I will.
I love cities like this because we get opportunities to do that very often, right? It just dying to myself and saying, like, I don't know what they're gonna do, but like you said, that's not my issue. I've already given away, I gave away my breakfast this morning. I bought 3 bottles of water so far. Like, so many things have happened already that I love it. And I feel, I don't know what they did with this stuff. I feel great. I feel fulfilled.
That's the thing, is and it's okay for you to feel good about it after. Like, people don't realize that when you are doing that, when you're giving, that it's more for you than anything else. Like, the fact that opportunity was there, you didn't do anything for them. They did something for you. Like, they made you feel good. Like, you were able to check off that good deed of the day. Like, that's something that you are going to be able to go to sleep with.
Yeah.
So if anything, like, it's just a matter of changing perspective, and we're so obsessed with ourselves and so caught up with what people are saying, what people think, like putting on a show for everyone else, that we forget that that's what's important. That's what's really going to make you happy.
So you're an accomplished 23-year-old. You've done a lot so far. What are some of the daily practices that you have so that you can put yourself in a place to give a damn, to do the work that you do? What are the kinds of things that a give a dammer like you does?
Give a dammer. Okay, that's a great question. So, I mean, this sounds cliche, but I always try to start my day with giving thanks. So even when I wake up, there's, like, the first thing that you say when you wake up, well, it's in Arabic and I'll translate it. It's Alhamdulillah alladhi ahyana ba'da ma matana wa ilayhi nushur, like, just giving thanks for being alive again after your sleep.
Yeah, because we didn't do anything to stay alive.
Yeah,
you know?
and then I always try to think of 3 things that I'm grateful for. This is either in the morning or in the middle of the day or at night. 3 things that I'm grateful for that's different than, like, just new things that I'm grateful for. And the reason that I do that is because when you are constantly thinking of different things that you're grateful for, you are rewiring your brain to look for good and look for positivity in your day. It's not just so important, it's necessary. Like, it is so mandatory, it's insane. And so when you think of 3 different things that you're grateful for, throughout the day, you're always going to be seeing good in everything, because even like a couple days ago, I had a really rough night. And by the end of the night, I was still able to see good in what happened.
Yeah.
And the only way that you're able to do that and not drown in the negativity that is our society today is if your mind is already rewired to a place where you're able to see good and positivity and opportunity and light in every single crevice of darkness. And so that's something. So even with the people that I'm very close to, like, well, we can sit in silence for a while, and then all of a sudden I'll ask, like, so what are you grateful for today? Or I'll text my friends and be like, what are you grateful for today? Because I'm curious to, like, make them think, but also to just be able to remind myself of the things that that I could have been grateful for today, or I could have recognized today, and then maybe recognize them down the line. Another thing is, whenever I'm engaging in conversation with people, before I talk to them, or if I know I'm about to have a conversation, instead of saying, hey, how are you? Because that's very cliche, and your answer is like, oh, I'm good, how are you? If I'm comfortable, or if I know it'll be okay to ask, I say, how is your heart? So I always start with that. And that is, one, because I'm always interested to see how people answer that. Because some people who are not used to, I'm sure. Oh my God, yes.
Like, what?
Like, wait, what did you just ask me? And some people who are not very comfortable with answering will be like, well, it's beating. And then some people will be like, oh my God, no one has, most people say the first time I ask them, no one has ever asked me that. And then they really think, and I'm like, okay, well, think about it. Like, I actually care. Like, I want to know, like, how's your heart? Like, how do you feel today? And so it's kind of become like my signature thing.
I like it.
Yeah. And then just, I'm like very obsessed with like scheduling and time management. And like, we see so many successful people today, and that depends on how you define success, of course.
Sure.
But it's just so important to start the day and end the day recognizing whether or not that you took a direction or a step in towards your life purpose or towards achieving this personal legend of yours that is a never-ending journey, and recognizing that it is a never-ending journey. And so for me, like, just being very conscious and more mindful, and that's something that I'm also working on. And then finally, I would say it's okay to read your comments once in a while. It's okay to read the tweets once in a while. It's okay to, like, I don't know, skim them, I guess. But understand that what people say about you is none of your business. It really isn't. And sometimes it is so hard, even for me, to understand that and to remember that. But the second you make what other people think about you your business, you begin to muddy your journey and your intention and your personal legend, because you'll find yourself doing things for other people. And I have been able to let go of that a long time ago, where even when I was like, I gained attention, or whatever you want to call it, when I was about 18 years old, like when everything kind of blew up for me. And I had no idea what I was doing. I had people in my community who were grown-ass men who would reach out to me and say, you don't deserve this. Like, you didn't work for this.
Wow. And
for me, like, looking back at it, it's a reflection of their own insecurity, because I didn't ask for this.
No.
And that if things happened a certain way for me, it is because it was meant to. And I will not question that.
No.
But at the time, of course, I would, like, doubt myself and be like, why did this happen? Like, do I deserve this? Maybe I should stop. Maybe I should whatever. And then, of course, like, I have an incredibly supportive family, and I never did. But just realizing time and time again that, like, only people who are insecure about themselves and are full of negativity themselves are going to be the ones that impose that kind of energy on you. And so it is none of your business. It's nothing for you to carry and take on. And to really just take care of yourself at the end of the day. Like, I've been so overwhelmed with working on this series, and it's very, 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 very heavy. It's heavier than I could have ever imagined, and haven't really had time to do some like self-care. Up until like the day before my wedding, I was working on this. I was in Seattle, and like, I remember the day before the wedding, I was just very like numb, because I was constantly thinking about everything that I saw, and it was really hard for me. And I just kind of took on an opportunity impulsively a couple days ago after that really rough day, and decided to like make the decision to do something or book a trip for just like pure self-care and reflection. And I haven't done it yet, so maybe I'll let you know how it goes. But yeah, I'm just kind of taking those actions.
I love it. Those are super helpful. Before the last question, I want to take a moment to honor you. I've like I said, I've only been following you for 6 or 7 months now online, and this is the first time we've met. But you exude love, passion. Like, I mean, people, even if they don't watch this video that may or may not turn out, they're gonna be able to feel it through their earbuds or however they're listening. That this is not a gimmick for you. This is not your shtick. This is your life. It is something. These are things that you really want to embody, and they're part of you. And so, I just want to honor the work that you're doing. I want to encourage you to keep it up. I'm sure many people are doing that, not just me, but keep it up. And we're rooting for you, and we're excited to see how you continue to not just influence and affect women, but everybody. Like, it's happening for a lot of people, and that's very observable, as an onlooker. So keep it up.
Thanks, and yeah thank you for letting me share this story and for letting me rant.
Absolutely.
So how's your heart?
My heart is. I feel very good. I really do. My heart's good for a lot of ways. I have a very supportive, this last 15 months have been, since we left Seattle, it's just been well, there's no other way to say it than a clusterfuck of just so many successes, so many failures. It's been crazy. And I have an incredibly supportive wife, incredibly supportive kids. They're 5, 4, and 3, and they're amazing. Incredibly supportive family and friends, and we're going after a few different projects. And so I feel good. I'm here sitting with you at VaynerMedia. Thanks, Claude, for setting this up. Getting to talk with people that are giving a damn. Like, my life's amazing. Things are great.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. Thank you for asking. Last question, and I know we have to wrap this up and you have to go. This is hypothetical.
Yeah.
For some odd reason, at the end of your life, when you die, I'm going to give you a eulogy. What do you want your legacy to be? What do you hope that I would say in front of your family, your friends, your husband, your kids? Everybody's there that you've influenced and loved and had an impact on. And I'm about to speak it. What am I saying at that point?
I've asked this question to people before, and I don't think anybody's like really straight up asked me that. So that kind of just gave me the chills. One, because I didn't really think about like a eulogy. That I just gave everything to anything that I did. Like, I always hope that people can see that in every single story that I've done, and every single talk that I've given, and every single interaction that I have with somebody who pours their heart out to me, that I gave them myself entirely. And like, I do that all the time because I have gone through such a strong journey of being able to accept myself entirely, being able to love myself entirely, and that wasn't always easy. And got to a place of confidence and authenticity and pure vulnerability where I realized that nobody has power over me, or nobody can make me feel a certain way unless I allow them to. And so if I'm ever coming across another person, if I'm ever coming to this conversation with you, like, I will always give you myself in the most vulnerable way, because I know what power that holds. And I know that when people have done that to me, that it has been something that has stuck with me for the rest of my life. And I hope that in every single interaction, in every single story that I've told, in every single project that I've taken on, in every single trip, and every single person that I've met on the street, that I'm able to do the same.
It's a good legacy.
I hope so.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really could do this for hours probably with you, but guys and girls, she's a big deal. She's got to go to Forbes for an interview and then come back and hang out with Gary Vaynerchuk. So
dang, that sounds pretty cool.
It is. That's a cool day. And you guys hang out with me, but whatever. So thank you very much.
We're going to have to do this again.
Yeah, let's do it again in a year or so, whatever.
Yeah.
This is fun.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much.
Many thanks to each one of you for listening. That was a ton of fun. I hope it was fun for you, and I hope you learned so many things. A few quick items before I sign off. I'm going to start featuring one Apple Podcast review each week. For a chance to have yours read on the podcast, get your butt over there and leave a review. This week's review is from Danny Blanton from Los Angeles. Here's what he had to say about the podcast. For anyone looking to see a broader glimpse of this world we live in, there are a multitude of ways to gather that information. Sometimes, like in most things in life, we need a guide. This podcast is one of the best ways to broaden our horizons and hear stories about lives that are changing. It's hosted by an intelligent and thoughtful host and requires your exploration. Listen and learn. Danny, thank you so much. That was so encouraging. I don't know if I live up to being an intelligent and thoughtful host, but I try, and you're awesome. Everyone else, go leave that review for your chance to have one read on the podcast. Hit me up on social media if you have any questions or just want to chat. I would love to hear from you. I'm at Nick Lepar everywhere, and also at Let's Give a Damn everywhere. I love you all. Have a fantastic week. I will catch you next week. Bye.